In March of 2022, Deshaun Watson signed a fully guaranteed $230 million contract, more than the likes of Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and the list goes on. This deal came with heavy controversy, as Deshaun was facing numerous off-field allegations at the time.
Just into the newsroom, the NFL is now investigating accusations against Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson.
22 civil lawsuits filed against Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson.
For the Browns, a franchise that suffered from quarterback instability, the move seemed like a desperate bid to secure a franchise guy and finally turn their fortunes around. But the gamble quickly backfired, leaving Cleveland fans ready to move on from him.
Right now, Watson is trash.
We're Cleveland!
We don't like Deshaun Watson!
I'm gonna burn this Watson jersey.
We had a great thing going, and it was ruined all by Watson.
From a 5-year, $230 million contract to just 2 years later being the most hated guy on the team, this is a story of how Deshaun Watson pulled off one of the world's largest legal heists in the sports world. We must start with answering the question, why did the Browns decide to move on from Baker Mayfield in the first place? Their decision wasn't made overnight. It was a combination throughout the years of hope, heartbreak, and ultimately the realization that Baker might not be the guy to lead them to the promised land. To understand why the Browns took the biggest gamble in NFL history on Deshaun, we must quickly examine the roller coaster ride that was Baker Mayfield's time in Cleveland. When the Browns drafted Baker with the first overall pick in 2018, it felt like a turning point for the franchise that had been the laughingstock for the league for decades.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield, quarterback, Oklahoma.
As you can see, the fans were excited with the pick. The fiery Heisman Trophy winner from Oklahoma brought the swag and confidence that Cleveland had been missing. In his rookie season, he broke the NFL record for most touchdown passes by a rookie, and for the first time in years, there was genuine optimism in Cleveland. The 2020 season was the high point of the Mayfield era. Under the guidance of head coach Kevin Stefanski, Mayfield led the Browns to their first playoff appearance in 18 years. In a wildcard victory, he played a near flawless game, ending Cleveland's long drought without a playoff win. For a moment, it seemed like the Browns had finally found their guy, but the cracks began to show in 21. Baker struggled with inconsistency, throwing interceptions at crucial moments, and failing to elevate the offense, many due to injuries, most notably a torn labrum in his non-throwing shoulder that he played through, which affected his performance. The Browns, who had entered the season with high hopes of building on the previous year, stumbled to just an 8-9 record and missed the playoffs. Off the field, tension between Baker and the Browns front office began to simmer. He felt that the organization wasn't fully supporting him, especially as he played through those injuries. The relationship grew strained, and the whispers began to circulate that the Browns weren't convinced Baker was the long-term answer. The Browns management had a tough decision to make. Baker Mayfield has shown flashes of brilliance, but was he the kind of quarterback who could win a Super Bowl? The front office, led by GM Andrew Berry and owner Jimmy Haslam, believed the answer was no.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
They were tired of mediocrity, tired of being a team that could make the playoffs but couldn't compete for championships. They wanted an elite quarterback, a game changer who could take them to the next level. And that's where Deshaun entered the picture. A 4-year vet and 3-time Pro Bowler with the Texans, was one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league at the time. Watson wasn't just another quarterback, he was a phenomenon, a player whose combination of raw talent, poise, and playmaking ability made him one of the most exciting young quarterbacks in the NFL. After an amazing career at Clemson, where he led the Tigers to a national championship in 2016, Deshaun entered the NFL with high expectations, and he quickly proved his worth, guiding the Texans to consecutive division titles in 2018 and 2019, where he had already thrown for 9,700 yards, 71 touchdowns, and 29 interceptions by then. But it was his breakout season in 2020 that took him to new heights, even as his team struggled. Despite the Texans finishing with a disappointing 4-12 record, Watson led the league with passing yards, throwing for 4,800 yards to go along with a career-high 33 touchdowns to only 7 interceptions. But it wasn't just the numbers that made him special, it was how he did it. Weaving through pressure, extending plays with his legs, and delivering pinpoint throws. His dual threat ability was a nightmare for opposing defenses. He could beat you with his arm or took the ball and ripped for a 20-yard scramble when the pocket collapsed, finishing the year with another 444 yards on the ground on 90 carries. He was the complete package, a quarterback who could single-handedly elevate an offense, even when the pieces around him were crumbling.
But Deshaun Watson is that dude. I think he's the lone individual that has the potential to be just as good as Patrick Mahomes.
But his attraction from the Browns wasn't just about his on-field play, it was about timing. The Browns, after decades of being booty, had finally built a competitive roster. They had a dominant offensive line, a solid running game led by Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and a defense that showed flashes of greatness. But what they thought they lacked was a quarterback who could take them to the next level. Baker Mayfield's inconsistency and battle with injuries had left the organization questioning whether he was the long-term answer. However, after just 1 year of signing his biggest contract with the Texans that brought him to tears, everything went downhill. It began in January of 2021 when Deshaun reached a breaking point with the organization, frustrated by what he saw as a series of poor front office decisions and a lack of direction, which led him to request a trade.
What do you think of Deshaun Watson officially saying that he wants out and putting it on the record?
I think it's long overdue.
The relationship between the star quarterback and the Texans, once filled with promise, has soured beyond repair. Deshaun felt betrayed by the team's handling of personnel moves, including the controversial trade of his favorite target, D-Hop, and the hiring of head coach David Culley, a decision made without his input. For Watson, it wasn't just about football, it was about respect, trust, and the control over his career. His trade request sent shockwaves through the league as teams began lining up for a chance to acquire one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the game.
Actually, the Texans might come out of this okay. On the one hand, they look awful. Because how do you blow it with Deshaun Watson? Everyone knows that's on you. That ain't on Deshaun Watson.
But just as his future seemed poised for a fresh start, the narrative took a dark and unexpected turn.
The Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson facing allegations of sexual misconduct and harassment.
Just into the newsroom, the NFL is now investigating accusations against Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson.
All filed by women who accuse Watson of lewd, inappropriate conduct during personal massages.
You have a star quarterback who is physically and financially powerful versus single moms who work for themselves, mostly from home.
Months after his trade request, allegations of misconduct began to surface. The allegations were devastating, not just for Watson's reputation, but for his trade value. Teams that had been eager to acquire him now hesitated. But it was the timing of the allegations that raised eyebrows, with some speculating that the Texans organization itself may have had a hand in leaking the information to sabotage Watson's trade value. Because if you think about it, he just signed a 4-year contract extension worth 160 M's in 2020, so they were not trying to let him go. Conspiracy theories began to swirl, fueled by the bitter divorce between the quarterback and the franchise. Did the Texans, feeling backdoored by Deshaun's public trade request, orchestrate the leak to punish him and diminish his market value? Or was it just simply an unfortunate coincidence that the allegations emerged at such a pivotal moment? The truth remains unknown, but the speculation added another layer of intrigue to an already chaotic situation. For Deshaun, the allegations were a nightmare scenario. Once celebrated as one of the NFL's brightest stars, he had now found himself at the center of a legal storm. The league launched its own investigation, and his future in the league was unknown as teams weighed the risk of acquiring him. The trade request that had once seemed like a straightforward business decision had morphed into a full-blown crisis with no easy resolution in sight. 2021 season was supposed to be another chapter in Deshaun's rise to stardom. Instead, it became a year of silence, uncertainty, and legal battles that left his career at a standstill. As the Texans prepared for the season, Deshaun was absent, not due to injury, but for the team vaguely described as a non-injury personal reasons. For an entire season, he watched from the sidelines as the Texans stumbled through a forgettable season, and his absence was a consistent reminder of what could have been. The decision to keep Watson off the field was more about optics as it was about football. Playing Deshaun would have been a public relations disaster, inviting scrutiny and backlash from fans, sponsors, and the league. But benching him came at a cost. Without their star quarterback, the Texans were terrible, drifting through the season with no clear direction and posting another only 4-win season. Deshaun, meanwhile, was going through one of his worst times. He was healthy, in his prime, and more than capable of playing at an elite level. Yet he was forced to sit and wait for his legal battles to play out in courtrooms and headlines. It was a surreal situation for a player who had once been celebrated as one of the most exciting talents in the game. As the season dragged on, the legal battles intensified. The allegations against Deshaun continued to mount, with more women coming forward to share their stories.
10 women accusing Deshaun Watson of sexual misconduct during massages were present for the hearing.
Now, Busby says the women decided to show up because they were called liars by Deshaun Watson's attorneys in the response to their allegations against the quarterback.
All deceived into thinking Deshaun Watson was a good guy. And unfortunately, we know that good guys can do terrible things.
The lawsuits painted a horrible picture, and the court of public opinion turned sharply against him. The NFL, under pressure to take action, launched its own investigation, further complicating his path back to the field. For Deshaun, the year off was a harsh reminder of how quickly fortunes can take a change in the NFL. Now with the NFL investigating, it left the process to drag on, leaving Watson and teams interested to acquire him in a state of unknown. Would he be suspended? If so, for how long? Those questions loomed large, casting a shadow shadow over any potential trade. Meanwhile, the Texans were stuck with the quarterback they couldn't play and couldn't trade. As for Watson, it became clear that his journey back to the field will be anything but straightforward. In March 2022, the Cleveland Browns made one of the most controversial and high-stake moves in NFL history.
Deshaun Watson is expected to be a member of the Cleveland Browns.
The Browns made headlines not just for trading for Deshaun, but for the huge bag they was handing him. A fully guaranteed 5-year, $230 million deal, the largest fully guaranteed contract in NFL history at the time.
That is $80 million more than the previous record for fully guaranteed money at signing.
This financial commitment was a jaw-dropping statement of intent from the Browns, a franchise desperate to finally shed its decade-long reputation as a loser and establish itself as a legitimate contender. The size of the guaranteed money sent shockwaves through the league, sparking debates about the risk and reward for such a massive investment in a player still in the middle of legal and ethical controversies.
To me, it's still premature because we don't. There's 22 lawsuits, there's 22 substitutes. I don't know whether he's won or lost. That's why I think it's premature by the Cleveland Browns to give this man the most guaranteed money ever, $230.
The contract drew comparisons to other star quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, who had not received fully guaranteed deals despite their impeccable resumes and clean reputations. Critics argued that the Browns had set a dangerous example, prioritizing talent over accountability and sending the wrong message to fans and players. The backlash wasn't just about the money, it was about the timing. His legal situation was still unresolved when the Browns signed him, and the allegations against him cast a long shadow over the deal.
I know these allegations is very, very serious, but like I've mentioned before, I've never assaulted any woman, I never disrespected any woman.
It also raised questions about the team's long-term financial flexibility. If Watson failed to live up to the expectations, or if the allegations continue to haunt him, the Browns will be stuck with a massive financial burden, unable to cut ties without crippling their salary cap. Despite the criticism, the Browns stood 10 toes on their decision, framing it as a necessary risk in their quest for a championship. They believed Deshaun's talent was worth the controversy and the cost, and was willing to bet their future on him.
It's not something we took lightly, it's something we took very seriously, and we feel comfortable with the process we've been through.
And I have to tell you, it was really hard, and we had to really work hard to get comfortable with the decision.
We also do feel good about the work that we did as we vetted this transaction.
I have confidence in the work that we put in.
For Deshaun, the deal was a lifeline, a chance to restart his career with a team fully committed to his success. But for the Browns, it was a gamble that would define their franchise for years to come. A bold move that would either be remembered as a genius one or one dumbass decision. As the media continued to dissect the deal, one thing was clear: the Browns had changed the game, either for better or worse.
And I knew that this was the perfect situation for me to have a fresh start, go win some Super Bowls, and move forward.
The drama only intensified when the NFL handed down its initial ruling on his suspension. In August 2022, Judge Sue L. Robinson, appointed as the disciplinary officer for the case, ruled that Deshaun would be suspended for 6 games, a punishment that many viewed as lenient given the severity of the allegations. The decision sparked outrage among the entire NFL world, who argued that the league was failing to hold him accountable. The Browns, however, let out a huge sigh of relief. A 6-game suspension meant that Deshaun would return by mid-season, giving them a chance to salvage their playoff hopes. But it was short-lived. The NFL, under pressure to send a stronger message, appealed Judge Robinson's decision, seeking a harsher punishment, and the appeal process dragged on, leaving his future unknown once again. Finally, in late August, the league announced its revised decision.
We have an 11-game suspension for Deshaun Watson and a $5 million fine.
The punishment was one of the most severe in NFL history for off-field conduct, a clear signal that the league was taking the allegations seriously. For Watson, the extended suspension was a bitter pill to swallow. It meant that he wouldn't step onto the field until late November, nearly 2 full years since his last NFL snap. For the Browns, the decision on one hand, they will be without their star quarterback for the majority of the season, a devastating blow to their playoff aspirations. On the other hand, the suspension provided closure, allowing the team to move forward with a clearer understanding of Deshaun's availability. When he finally stepped onto the field in December, it was a moment filled with anticipation, pressure, and uncertainty. The first half of the season wasn't hot for the Browns, going 4-7 through 12 weeks. With Deshaun serving his 11-game suspension, the team turned to veteran backup Jacoby Brissett to hold the fort down. Brissett did his best to keep the Browns afloat, but inconsistency plagued the offense. There was moments of promise, gritty wins, and flashes of brilliance from stars like Nick Chubb and Amari Cooper, but without their true QB1, the Browns felt incomplete. They were a team stuck in neutral, waiting for their missing piece to to arrive. And when Deshaun's suspension finally ended, the weight of expectations was massive. This was the moment the Browns had been waiting for, the reason they had traded away their future and handed Watson the largest guaranteed contract in NFL history. But will he deliver? And how ironic, his first game back was against no other than the Houston Texans, leaving for a mixed reaction from the fans.
I think the Browns are the scum of the earth for actually signing the guy for a guaranteed contract.
A lot of those victims have to see him play, and so that brings up a lot of triggers for those people.
Get back to football. The legalities are over.
The stage was set for a dramatic comeback story, but reality proved far messier. After nearly 2 years away from the game, Deshaun looked rusty, his timing was off and rhythm disrupted. The playmaker who had once torched the defense with his arm and legs was not there. He completed just 12 of 22 passes for 131 yards, throwing an interception and failing to score a touchdown, but was carried by defensive and special team scores in a 27-14 win. As the remainder of the season came to an end, his performance remained uneven. In 6 games, in which he won 3, he threw for 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions, posting a passer rating of just 79.1. The Browns, who had went into the season with playoff hopes, finished the season with a mediocre 7-10 record. For fans, it was a frustrating end to a season that had begun with so much promise. The Browns had gambled everything on Deshaun, and in his first few games, the payoff was nowhere to be found. The 23 season was supposed to be the year he silenced the haters and proved that he was worth the $230 million. Expectations were sky high. The Browns, armed with a talented roster and a defense that was rapidly becoming one of the league's best, were seen as legitimate contenders. But what unfolded was a season that left fans wondering if the Browns' massive investment in Watson would ever pay off. From the start, his play was all over the place. There were moments of him reminding everyone why he was once considered one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the NFL. One crazy scramble touchdown here and a perfectly placed deep ball there. But those moments were overshadowed by inconsistency. Missed throws, questionable decisions, and a lack of chemistry with his receivers plagued his performance. The Browns' offense, which had been expected to do big things with Deshaun leading them, often folded, leaving fans and analysts scratching their heads. Was Deshaun still shaking off the rust, or were the injuries and off-field drama beginning to take their toll? Speaking of injuries, they became a recurring theme in this season as well. It started with a shoulder issue in week 3, forcing him to miss the week 4 crucial game against the division rival Ravens, then turned around 6 weeks later and had a fracture in his right shoulder in week 10, which ultimately ended his season, because on November 15th, the Browns announced that he will undergo season-ending surgery to repair the broken bone in his throwing shoulder. Each time Deshaun seemed to find his rhythm, another setback would derail his progress. The injuries not only limited his effectiveness on the field, but also raised serious questions about his durability. For a player whose $230 million contract was supposed to be an anchor for the franchise for years to come, his inability to stay healthy was a growing concern. As the season came to a close, the Browns were left with more questions than answers. Deshaun's talent was undeniable, but his inability to stay on the field and deliver consistent performances had cast a dark shadow over his future in Cleveland. The nightmare was far from over, and the pressure was mounting, leaving Browns faithful wondering, would Deshaun rise to the occasion in 2024, or would the Browns' bold gamble go down as one of the most costliest mistakes in NFL history?
We won a Super Bowl ring in Cleveland. If he could bring that here, that'd be great. Before I die, I just want to see that one time.
He's not terrible, but he's not, great.
With another chance of redemption on the line going into the 2024 season, which was supposed to be a successful comeback, ultimately ended in one of his worst seasons of his career. A collapse so bad that it left the front office, fans, and analysts questioning whether he will ever be the same player again. From the very first snap, it was clear something was off. His signature dual threat abilities had vanished and replaced by a career-worst decision-making. By week 6, he led the NFL by being sacked 31 times and posted a league-high 12.4% sack rate, nearly double the average, as defenders swarmed to him like moths to a light. His passing stats were horrible as well, with 1,100 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions across 7 games, with a 79 passer rating that ranked among the NFL's lowest. Even completions fell hollow. His throws routinely missed targets, which started to draw boos from the Browns stadium.
Would love to have Flacco right now. Where is he? Is he busy?
We need a better quarterback. Well, Deshaun looked terrible. Everybody looked terrible.
The lowest point came in week 7 against Cincinnati. Deshaun, already battered by weeks of criticism, dropped back on a routine play, then crumbled to the turf without contact.
Immediately clutches at his right ankle as Cleveland's going to maintain possession. You see, oh boy, you see the buck.
As the replay showed, you could just see his Achilles tendon just tear. As the medical staff rushed to him, the most unthinkable happened. The fans erupted in cheers.
He's not going to come back.
So sorry, but get better soon. He needed to go.
I'm so sorry he got hurt, but what was he doing for the Cleveland Browns?
You can't cheer for someone when they get hurt. I mean, that was classless.
And this was a clear sign how the Browns fans really felt about Deshaun. But his teammates like Jameis Winston and Myles Garrett were disgusted by the crowd.
Whether it's an opponent that goes down or one of our own, we don't boo.
People are cheering. I can't find an excuse for that. That's disgusting behavior.
And I do not want the treatment that Deshaun Watson has received from these passionate fans.
Even Coach Stefanski admitted it was disappointing.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever okay to cheer when someone's injured. I'm sure it's not every person in that building doing that, but that's disappointing.
For Deshaun, the injury wasn't just physical. It was the final serving to a fractured relationship. By the season's end, Deshaun's tenure in Cleveland had become a cautionary tale. The Texans, armed with Cleveland's traded picks, built a contender, while the Browns faced a 1-6 record in Deshaun starts and a quarterbackless future. His Achilles tear, a potential career ender at 29, only deepened the darkness.
Man, messages for Jimmy Haslam and Browns ownership. Get rid of Deshaun ASAP.
The media didn't hold back either. Deshaun's name became synonymous with bust. His contract labeled as one of the worst in NFL history, with CBS Sports ranking his contract among the NFL's all-time worst. Even worse than the Carson Wentz Eagles collapse. Analysts dissected every misstep, every failed drive, every moment that showcased a quarterback who seemed to have lost his magic.
Deshaun Watson is awful. It's so awful that if somebody wanted to arrest him for being awful, I would accept it.
Even social media exploded with memes and hot takes, while former players and coaches questioned whether Deshaun's time away from the game had permanently altered his trajectory. The narrative was no longer about redemption, it was about regret. The Browns, once seen as a team on the rise, were now failing week after week, and Deshaun, the man who was supposed to be their savior, had become the face of their downfall. Earlier this year in January, the saga of Deshaun and the Browns took another dramatic turn, leaving fans and analysts wondering if this might be the final chapter of this nightmare. January 10th, 2025, Ian Rappaport tweeted, Deshaun ruptured his Achilles again and had to go under surgery again to repair it, less than 3 months after the original tear, which will cause him to face a longer road back to recovery, and now he could miss all of the 2025 season. The Browns' $230 million gamble on Deshaun has become a nightmare that just continues with each passing day. Since putting on the orange and brown in 2022, he has played in only 19 out of 57 possible games, with injuries and suspensions derailing what was supposed to be a franchise-altering move. Now with this latest setback, the possibility of him missing all of next season looms large, further complicating the Browns' future and testing the patience of the loyal Dog Pound fans.
We do not want him in our city any longer.
We had a great thing going, and it was ruined all by Watson.
To trade basically the entire future of your franchise for a guy that hadn't played in 2 years, has all these sexual assault allegations, it's just one of the most boneheaded moves in sports history.
Cleveland now finds itself between a rock and a hard place, shackled by an aging, injury-prone quarterback and a fully guaranteed contract. The financial burden is staggering. If Deshaun never takes another step for the Browns, the team will have paid him $230 million just for 19 games, a figure that would make the biggest robbery in NFL history.
Maybe he needs the whole year off to get his act together so he can get back to being a football player.
I agree. I agree. A lot of money.
I agree.
As the Browns front office is faced with this predicament, speculation runs rampant. Will they attempt to trade him, hoping another team sees value where they now see liability? Should they make the bold move and just cut him, and just take the hit of the enormous amount of dead cap space in the process? Or will they once again return to the negotiating table, seeking to restructure his deal in a desperate bid to salvage something from this bad investment? The coming months will be crucial for both Deshaun and the Browns. As he embarks on another rehab process, the team must figure out what they want to do. Maybe potentially take a quarterback with a second overall pick in the upcoming draft as their lifeline. The Watson era in Cleveland, once looked at as new beginnings for Browns football, now stands at a crossroads, with the possibility it might not end with a bang, but with the quiet finality of a medical report and a salary cap casualty.